It is within the paradoxical bifurcation of the conceptual and the unnameable that we locate the trembling origin of what we shall henceforth call existential polyvalence. This notion, unmoored from the linear constraints of human cognition, proposes that the being for itself, that archaic kernel which defines the contours of individuation, is simultaneously the being for the other in an infinite regress of self-reflection that denies the premise of identity altogether. Let it be stated unequivocally that such a dialectic does not merely oscillate, but instead folds, ceaselessly consuming its own foundations in an act of recursive autophagy that obliterates the very predicates by which it seeks to affirm itself. To apprehend the condition of liminal entanglement is to confront a field of pure ontic instability, wherein the very act of perception collapses into what I term Meta-immanence, a state where observer and observed are inextricably woven into a nexus of dissonant co-determination. Here one finds that the notion of essence as distinct from appearance is not merely insufficient, but actively misleading. Essence does not precede appearance, rather it is subsumed by the phenomenological interference of countless intersecting ontologies, a chaos of perspectives whose coexistence defies synthesis. Consider, for instance, the hermeneutic chiasmus inherent in the idea of relational integrity. The moment one posits a relation, one has already presupposed the distinctness of relator, and yet these relator cannot be said to exist outside the relations that define them. It is within this aporia that the ontological polysemy of existence emerges. The simultaneity of unity and fragmentation, a logic of asymptotic convergence wherein the totality of being is always proximate yet perpetually deferred. To articulate this phenomenon in terms of classical metaphysics would be to mistake its nature entirely. It is neither substance nor process, but an ontological fissure that perpetually displaces its own ground. In such a framework, meaning itself becomes an act of violence, a delimitation imposed upon an infinitely malleable flux. This violence of meaning reveals the profound ethical implications of existential polyvalence, for to speak is to exclude, to name is to efface. The question arises, how does one navigate a reality where every act of understanding is simultaneously an act of erasure? The answer, though elusive, lies in the recognition of what I shall call the counterpoint of indeterminacy. This is not merely a negation of meaning, but a positive affirmation of its impossibility, a stance that rejects closure while embracing the infinite plenitude of the open. To this end, let us delve into what might be termed the phenomenology of nullification, a concept that resists articulation even as it demands it. Nullification here does not denote annihilation, but rather a radical reconfiguration of the conditions under which existence itself is rendered intelligible. Imagine, if you will, a framework in which the boundaries of selfhood are not fixed, but are instead sites of continual negotiation, points of ontic diffraction, where the self disperses into a multiplicity of coexistent potentials. In this schema, identity is not a stable entity, but a vector field of intersecting forces, each one shaping and reshaping the contours of subjectivity in an endless interplay of creation and dissolution. But what then of agency within this ontological maelstrom? To speak of agency as traditionally conceived, as the capacity of an autonomous subject to act upon the world, is to fall prey to an anachronistic metaphysics. Agency, under the conditions of existential polyvalence, must be reconceived as a form of ontic resonance, a mode of being that operates not through imposition, but through attunement. This attunement is not passive acquiescence, but a dynamic engagement with the multiplicities that constitute the real. It is the capacity to inhabit contradiction, to dwell within the tensions that define existence, without seeking to resolve them. Such a perspective necessitates a re-evaluation of the ethical domain, for the traditional dichotomies of good and evil, right and wrong, cannot withstand the dissolution of stable categories that existential polyvalence entails. Instead, ethics becomes a matter of ontological hospitality, the capacity to make space for the otherness of the other without reducing it to the same. This is not a simple matter of tolerance, but a radical openness to the unfamiliar, the disruptive, the incomprehensible. It is an ethics that operates not through judgment, but through acknowledgement, a recognition of the irreducible singularity of each moment, each being, each fragment of existence. In conclusion, the philosophical framework proposed here does not offer solutions so much as it exposes the inadequacies of the questions we have been asking. To think within the mode of existential polyvalence is to relinquish the comfort of certainty, to embrace the vertigo of a reality that is at once infinitely complex and profoundly indeterminate. It is to inhabit a space where every boundary is provisional, every identity contingent, every truth partial and incomplete. And it is within this space, this liminal entanglement, that the possibility of genuine understanding, or perhaps something beyond understanding, may yet emerge.